I do have 2 daughters, so they're definitely like number one. I do, regular mom stuff.
Kalei was only 28 years old, raising her daughters, when her world shattered.
Hello. Okay, so I wanted to make a video and share my diagnosis story. From the title of this video, I have stage 2 rectal cancer with a grade T3 tumor. I remember last year when I had first gotten the original diagnosis, I told my husband, I want to take some family photos. And I don't know, am I going to go through treatment? I'm going to lose my hair? I don't know what's going to happen. And there's this one of the 4 of us together, and it's my most favorite photo of all time. It has so much meaning behind it, and it was just such a vulnerable, really emotional time. So it just reminds me of how thankful we were for each other.
That picture of Kalei and her family would hold even more value 1 year later.
I received a diagnosis last week. I have been diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer.
The cancer spread to Kalei's lungs, and she had to have the devastating conversation with her 2 daughters.
So I remember we sat them down and, we just said, Mommy's sickness is back. And I remember my 4-year-old, she was really sad about that. She was really sad because, sorry. I just remember last year when I was on chemo, they weren't allowed. I brought home a pump for 2 days every round of chemo, and I wasn't allowed to hold them, or they couldn't be on me, and I think that's really heavy for young kids,
This is Kalei's story. Kalei's symptoms started in early 2024.
Before that, I was completely healthy. I never had any health issues. I had 2 healthy pregnancies and deliveries. I've never had any, never had any issues. So then in February, March, I started getting weird things going on with my bowel habits. I think I was starting to go more frequently than I ever had. I was kind of a person that would go every few days. It's it's kind of weird. I don't know. And then it started, I was going more frequently, and I was maybe I'm getting more fiber in my diet. Maybe I'm just eating healthier, drinking more water. And then I started noticing when I would have a bowel movement, some weird, tissue-y stuff was coming out. And I'd never seen anything like that. It was kind of creepy. I was, kind of looked alien-like. And so I was, taking pictures, documenting, showing my husband, and then I was kind of just let's just keep track of this. I'm not really sure what it is. And then I think maybe a week or 2 had gone by, and I was starting to have blood in my stool along with this tissue-y stuff. And so then at that point, I think I was having blood for a few days. And at that point, my husband and I were okay, I need to make an appointment for a general physician appointment. So I made an appointment, got in, and told her all my symptoms, what I was experiencing. She looked at my history, and she told me, I'll check and see if maybe it's an internal hemorrhoid, or, maybe you're just, after you have kids, you get stuff kind of tears down there, it could be different. I'm okay. And then so she checked for that. She said there's nothing in there. And then she said, I'm going to refer you for a sigmoidoscopy. So, I went. I was waiting for that. I think it was scheduled out for 2 months out from the appointment I had with her. So I was okay, that's fine. She also ran blood work on me. She said, you're not anemic. There's nothing alarming in your blood work. Everything looks good. It's okay. So then I left there, and I was just okay, I guess I'll just wait, kind of wait it out. She's saying everything's fine. And then a couple weeks were going by, and I was still experiencing the bleeding and this tissue-y stuff. And then I started having blood clots coming out while I was using the bathroom. And I was oh, I've never had this before. That doesn't seem normal. And then I was having intense stomach cramping, and I was oh my gosh, something is wrong. And so I think like one of the clots that I had at the beginning was like this big. Like it was very big. And so I had my husband take me to the ER because we were looking up online, like, if I'm bleeding this much, having clots, like, I can't really wait till this scan or this appointment for this procedure. So we went in and I told that doctor in the ER, whatever, everything that had been going on. I showed him photos of like the blood clots I was having. And all he did was run blood work. He didn't order scans or anything like that. And he pretty much told me the same thing that my doctor had told me a couple weeks ago, that my blood work looks fine. I'm not anemic. There's nothing life-threatening. You have to just wait for that procedure.
While waiting to get answers, Kalei took matters into her own hands.
So after that ER visit, I remember I was feeling like starting to get frustrated because my husband and I were like, there's something going on. Like I've never ever had this stuff. There's something more serious. And I feel like they're just saying you're healthy, you're young, you've never had any health conditions. So, we don't really need to do anything. So I called my mom, I called my aunt who has walked through cancer a few times, and I talked to them about it, and they pretty much said, like, you need to try and see if you can call GI, see if they have like a cancellation list to get you on, tell them your symptoms, directly tell them. And so I was like, okay. So I literally got on the phone with them when I walked out of the ER, and the girl was super sweet. And I told her my symptoms, and she's like, oh my gosh, I am so happy that you called, because that is not normal and that absolutely needs to be checked out right away. And then she told me that she wanted me to go forward with a full colonoscopy instead of a sigmoid. So we got that booked, and she said, I can bring you in the next week. I remember my husband and I were kind of just like, maybe I have like ulcerative colitis or like Crohn's disease or something, some like autoimmune disease. Maybe there's like something weird going on in there. And we were really hopeful. So I remember he actually had to work the day of my appointment, and so I had my mom come with me just because we weren't super worried that it was going to be anything crazy. We were just like excited to get an answer. And after I came out of the procedure, I was laying in the recovery area, and I remember the doctor had come over and he said, I called your mom because I want to talk to both of you. And I was like, that doesn't sound like a good, doesn't sound good. So called her back, and he said that he went in there and he found a mass that was growing through the rectal wall down at the end of my colon. And he said, with the way it's growing, I'm very concerned for cancer. And we were just like, wow. We were shocked. My husband and I, were just kind of processing, like, what would we do if it was cancer? Like, what would even happen, And then I remember, this is just something that's like so significant to my personal story. The day after my colonoscopy, I was driving somewhere by myself, and I was listening to my worship music, and a little like sermon excerpt had come on in between the songs that I had never heard. And it talked about how, suffering and like being joyful in your suffering, and talked about sacrifice. And it was something that just really, really resonated with me. And I was like, I'm just praying, and because I'm just, when you hear cancer, of course you're going to be like going to worst case scenario. You're searching on the internet. You're like, what in the world is happening? Especially for someone so young, you don't think that could ever really happen to you. It was like maybe 24 hours from the colonoscopy, we got the call from that doctor, and he said, I'm so sorry, but, it's confirmed that it is cancer. So we were just, all the emotions. It's like, you can't really predict how you would feel.
Kalei's care team had a plan, but it was still such a shock.
My first appointment after I got the diagnosis was with a colorectal surgeon. So he brought us in. I had done all the scans, the PET scans, the MRI, all that kind of stuff. And he brought us in, and he could actually do a sigmoidoscopy in office because of the location of where my tumor was. And so he kind of like checked it out, and he said, okay, so we're going to take it to tumor board. So that's something that they always say, we'll take it to tumor board, and we're going to consult with a bunch of different doctors. And so he called me a couple of days later, and he said, so we've come to the decision. So you have you're stage 2, grade T3 tumor, And he said, the way that we want to go after this is we're going to start you on radiation therapy with capecitabine chemo pills. And then after that, you'll get a tiny break. We are on our way to our radiation oncologist. We are going to the center where I'm going to get radiation every day. I'm getting my final mapping CT done this morning, and then we meet with my doctor, and he is going to give us our treatment plan and start date. We are anticipating, so it is Thursday, we're anticipating it starting on Monday. And then we're going to get you started on like a few months of IV chemo. And to hear that in itself, like that treatment plan, you're like, whoa. Wow, I just truly, we were like, oh my gosh, we thought we were just going to get surgery and I was going to be done with it because he was the first person I met with. But no, they said that they've had so many studies that have shown that when they do treatment first to a localized cancer, that a lot of times they're able to shrink it down to teeny tiny or completely dissolve it altogether. So in my case, they were able to dissolve it, so I didn't have surgery.
The treatment worked, and Kalei showed no evidence of disease until a suspicious spot popped up.
It was really incredible. We were all so happy. And then they set me on like a wait and watch plan. So every 3 months for that first year after I ended treatment, they were going to do like a set of scans and blood work and like exams. So I had my first round of that, I believe in March of this year. And so I, just went in for my regular scans and everything. And on my chest CT, it had showed that a nodule had popped up. I think it was a 7 millimeter nodule. And I'd never had that on any of my other scans. And so I immediately asked my oncologist, I said, what's the deal with this thing? This is brand new. We've never seen this before. And she told me it's nothing to be worried about. Everybody has nodules on their lungs. Everybody has nodules all over their body. It's a common thing. So there's like a normal range. And so my blood levels had gone down into the normal range at the end of 2024. But when I had this first like checkup scan in all my blood work, it had elevated a little bit. And then this nodule had popped up. So I asked my doctor, I said, is that concerning, the combination of both of those things? She said, nope, it's still in the normal range. There's nothing to be concerned about. So I asked her, I said, can I get another scan of my chest like in a month? Because I don't feel good about waiting till the next 3-month cycle because this thing could possibly double in size. And then, I don't know how the lungs work. I don't know how any of that works. And she told me no. She said, no, we're going to wait because I can't order that. The hospital won't let me. They won't sign off on monthly scans. And so then at that point, I was feeling really, really frustrated because I'm like, I know something's wrong. I've been through all this stuff. Like I can kind of like read between the lines with like blood results and scan results and all that stuff. And so then I had called my hospital and requested a second opinion. For some reason, they circled me back around her and she ended up getting me a scan. I think like it was 4 weeks out. So I ran my blood test results again when that scan came up. They had increased again, and then the nodule had grown another 2 millimeters. So I'm like, if I didn't request this, it would have just kept going. Why as a doctor, I didn't understand why she wouldn't want to be more proactive about it because, I don't know. I don't know what was going on. It was really strange.
After advocating for herself, Kalei was referred to a pulmonologist, a doctor who specializes in lungs and the entire respiratory system.
So I got in contact with my pulmonologist, and she's really wonderful. And she let me ask a million questions because I love to ask questions, and so does my husband. So she was fantastic. She said, I'm definitely concerned for cancer. The CT results that I had gotten for that showed that the nodule had grown again to 11 millimeters. And that was in like 3 weeks, I think. So it was just like growing. And so we were like really prepared that it was probably going to be cancer. My pulmonologist called me. She called me and she said, do you want to discuss over the phone or would you like to meet in person? It's like, you can just tell me right now. It's all right. And so she said, unfortunately, it is cancer and it has the same cell structure as your colon cancer. So it's a GI origin. And so I said, is this technically, like, is this like a stage 4 diagnosis? And she said, unfortunately, it is. Yes. So that like rocked my world.
Kalei and her husband processed the devastating news alongside their family and friends.
I remember the day I had gotten the call for the diagnosis. It was super emotional. My husband and I, couldn't really keep it together. And then we had like, our family was coming over, our friends were calling, and it was just really, really emotional. It was like, it kind of felt super, super heavy because stage 4, like, that just sounds like, oh my gosh, like, you're gonna die. Like, that's what it sounds like. That's what I feel like we've all been made to think is gonna happen when you have stage 4. I just remember like reassuring like everybody, because I would say I'm more of like the rock. Like I calm everybody down. Everybody can get kind of like, you know, crazy with their emotions, but I just kept reminding everybody like it's only in one spot that we know of. I just had a PET scan. It doesn't show any evidence of disease in any other organs. So like let's be hopeful and let's keep praying and let's keep asking the Lord for peace and for comfort, and like we can't control what's going on. Like there's nothing we can do about it.
At this point, Kalei knew it was time to tell her 2 daughters.
And I think it was like the next week after the diagnosis, my husband and I were like, we want to probably tell our daughters what's going on. They're still really young. They're only 4 and 2. But my 4-year-old, she's so smart. So smart. And I didn't want her to keep hearing everybody talking about all this stuff around her, and she's just like confused. So I remember we sat them down and, we just said, mommy's sickness is back and mommy has to get more medicine probably, maybe some surgeries, and, we're going to get the cancer out of her body again. But mommy's going to be tired, mommy's going to be sick. And I remember my 4-year-old, she was really sad about that. She was really sad because, sorry. I just remember last year when I was on chemo, they weren't allowed. I brought home like a pump for 2 days every round of chemo, and like I wasn't allowed to like hold them, or they couldn't be on me, and I think that's really heavy for young kids, So yeah, that was hard. And to see her so emotional because she's probably just thinking what happened last year is going to happen again, and so we just try to reassure her,
Kalei had also gotten a new oncologist, and her team knew how they wanted to handle the cancer spreading.
The oncology team, the thoracic surgeons, and the pulmonologist, all 3 of those backgrounds of doctors came together. So then we finally got a call, and he said, my new oncologist, he said, I'm going to link you up with the thoracic surgeon team, and they have come to a conclusion that they would like to, move forward with surgery first, since you only have this one nodule. You don't have multiple, and it's in an area where they can resect like a wedge out of your lung. And actually, before I had that call with him, I remember I had another chest scan, and it had shown that something else had popped up on my right lung. So I now had 2 nodules, one on each lung. And so that was like, oh my goodness, now it's like spreading, it's jumping around, like it's crazy. And so then the surgeon, he told us, he said, this is a very rare case. We don't have a lot of cases like this. So he said, we believe, the 3 surgeons, he said, we all believe that doing lung resections would be the best case, and then we can go from there. And so my husband and I, we looked at each other and we just told him on the phone call, we said, okay, that sounds good, let's do that. I finished my surgery, and what did they just give me?
Dilaudid.
Mm-hmm. They cut out a smaller piece than the doctor thought he was going to have to, and my margins were clear. So it was really good news.
Even after everything Kalei has been through, she has been able to find peace in her diagnosis.
When people ask me how I'm doing and what's going on or how are you feeling, and I'm like, saying like, I'm doing great. I'm actually doing really great. A lot of the times they're like, that's not even possible. Like, you shouldn't be doing great. Like when I was going through chemo, I was like continuing with regular life activities, and I had so much peace about everything. I could talk openly to anybody about my situation and my diagnosis. I just felt so, I felt like my faith really, really transformed my heart last year, and taught me a lot, and gave me like this strength that you can't pull only from within. And the patient story is actually where I had started last year. I had found stories on there on YouTube last year, and those helped me immensely. Like to hear other people around my age, or going through very similar things to me, that was huge, because I can hear like their experiences, how they were able to like go through normal life with this disease and through treatment, and just gave me a lot of hope.
After undergoing 2 lung surgeries, Kalei and her husband are now focusing on moving forward with everyday life.
We are going through our life like it's normal. Like I don't really have anything going on. Not that we're like not trying to acknowledge it or anything like that, but it helps us when we can kind of just move forward with like, okay, we have like school drop off Monday through Friday, school pickup, we have activities, we have birthday parties, we have plans with friends, and we're going out of town, we're doing this, and I think that keeping busy really helps us cope with this. And we went out of town when I got my first stage 4 diagnosis, and that was incredible. Just getting out of the space you live in really, really helps to get your mind off of things. In the grand scheme of things, like, nobody is promised tomorrow, and I think a lot of people, I did, my husband did, but I think a lot of people forget the gravity of that. We take it for granted, and I think that when you are diagnosed with a sickness, obviously your world comes crashing down, and you start having realizations that, healthy people probably wouldn't have. So I think just trying to take advantage of like when I feel good and when I'm not recovering or I'm not going through treatment or anything, I think that is just time for us to really like thrive and make memories and plan vacations and, do all that kind of stuff.
Kalei wants people to know, always advocate for yourself and stay strong.
I've just seen and heard of so many stories of people that just kind of listen to the doctors because they don't really know anything else. I just want to always encourage people to listen to your body, and you really have to be your own advocate. I never understood any of that before I went through this, but it's so true. You're gonna get, you may get bad like interactions with doctors, or negative interactions, or not get answers from certain doctors, or you may have like a fantastic experience where the doctors will advocate for you. I just really want to encourage everybody to trust your gut for sure if you don't have anybody, and just push, because the healthcare doctors and nurses, like, their job is to serve us and help us. It's not the other way around. Like, we shouldn't feel bad about like getting a second opinion from a different doctor, like hurting this doctor's feelings. I think that was something I struggled with at first too. So I'm like, I don't want to hurt my doctor's feelings, like make her think that I don't trust anything she's saying. But that's not the case. Once you find doctors that listen to you and they advocate for you, I think that that's really important. I would say if you are walking through a season of sickness or received a diagnosis that you weren't expecting, I know that it is 110% possible to get through difficult seasons of your life where you're suffering and you're in pain and you're in a state of unknown and, questioning everything. It's possible to walk through all of that with peace. I lean so much into my faith, and that's truly the only thing that's really kept me going and kept me strong. And I don't think that as humans we can really deal with all these crazy emotions that flash in front of you when you are faced with a diagnosis. That's why I believe that we have to pull that strength and that comfort and that peace from somewhere else. And I think it's really beautiful that such a terrible sickness can bring so many good things. So just be positive. Don't spiral. Don't look on the internet.